Welcome, everyone, to our October coffee chat. I'm Laura Knudsen-Murray. I'm the GIS coordinator and community outreach assistant with IrisBG. With us today is Shanna Jones, our social media outreach assistant, and Oyvind Rustin, who is our founder and CEO. The recording, presentation, and other material will be made available in our knowledge library. All of our previous coffee chats can be found there in the category Articles and Presentations. You can follow the topic IrisBG Coffee Chats and be notified by email every time something new is published. The idea with these sessions is that we at IrisBG would like to offer you a space where you can connect with your peers and have a chat about issues that arise with IrisBG and any work in your collection. We don't have a fixed format for these sessions, so please, if you'd like to present anything or challenge the community or talk on a topic, let us know. It can be anything, big or small. Hopefully today you'll make a few connections and together we might become a bit wiser. Save the date. Our next coffee chat will be given by Autumn Ayers from Descanso on dashboards and the IrisBG ArcGIS mobile integration. And then also, if you happen to be in the Australia-New Zealand area, Shanna will be at the Botanic Gardens of Australia and New Zealand Congress in November. So come say hi. Here is an overview of the institutions represented here today. It's great to see so many from all over. We could launch our regular poll, gives us a chance to see your experience with IrisBG. What is your level of expertise using IrisBG? Are you a novice, an intermediate user, advanced, or just trying out the trial? Looks like about 73% are intermediate, 9% advanced, and 18% novice. Thank you for filling out that poll. Our speaker here today is Michelle Beloskur. She is the Midwest Invasive Plant Network Director. She has been in this role since March 2022. And as a part of her role, she co-directs the Public Gardens as Sentinels Against Invasive Plants initiative. Prior to joining the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, she was director for the Conservation District in Michigan, where she spearheaded and supervised the Mid-Michigan Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. Her background also includes experience in environmental research and regulation. She holds a bachelor's in biology from the University of Michigan and a master's in environmental geoscience from Michigan State University. Without further ado, I will hand it over to you. After her presentation, Shanna will go over how our add-on module that was designed for the PGSIP works. So.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me today. As Laura said, I'm going to be talking today about Public Gardens as Sentinels Against Invasive Plants. And I am just one member of a working group that guides this project. So you'll see on the right here, there are several other entities, other public gardens that are engaged in this project. There are others as well who had kind of helped get the program off the ground. But these are all our active working group members, and we're also currently supported through the U.S. Forest Service. So we appreciate their support. And yes, as she said, I am with the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, which covers a 10-state province area. Our mission is to reduce the impacts of invasive plants in the Midwest. So the initiative I'm talking about today, public PGSIP, I'm going to start saying, 'cause it's much shorter and easier, is a North American-wide initiative, but it dovetails really, really nicely with MIPN's mission. And so we've been involved with this project since its inception because our audience is really interested in knowing what invasive plants are on the horizon, right? What do we need to be preventing? What do we need to be focused on for early detection? How do we effectively manage landscapes for, biodiversity and conservation? And PGSIP has very similar goals. It's basically an early detection network led by the expertise of public gardens and arboreta. And I'm going to imagine many of you, if not all, are very familiar with the invasion curve. So this just shows that, over time, when an invasive plant has gotten an opportunity to be introduced, as time goes by and a larger area is infested, it gets harder and harder to effectively manage them. And you can end up with very expensive costs, both economically and environmentally. So usually when you are shown the invasion curve, the emphasis is that we want to prevent invasive species. That's the most, economic, again, and environmentally a protective approach. PGSP is a little bit different, right? Because we're talking about plants that have been introduced very purposefully, right? Public gardens bring in plants from around the world, and there's a tremendous value to that, right? That has a role in conserving rare and endangered species, in connecting people to the great diversity of plant life right around the world. And there's research value. So we really appreciate the value that public gardens and arboretum serve. But we also know that occasionally plants do become problematic. And so PGSIP kind of lives where this blue arrow is. These plants are here. They may only be in public gardens at this point. But if public gardens who are on the ground, who know these plants really well, are starting to see them behave problematically, we can still intervene early before we get into the red zone here where things are unmanageable or take an incredible amount of management and time. And we do unfortunately know that horticulture can be a pathway of invasive plant introductions. This study, this paper came out in 2023, and it is Midwest focused, but it's compelling. It does show that out of 89% of woody invasive plants have an origin in ornamental horticulture, 65% of vines, and 31% of herbaceous plants. So it is something we need to be attentive to. And it's not too surprising because a lot of the traits that are associated with invasiveness are also really desirable for horticulture, right? We want things that are hardy, that are going to maybe grow rapidly, have big, beautiful flowers. But we also know when things are introduced, multiple times, or what you can see in public gardens is you have a lot of cultivars planted near each other. It can create conditions where things spread in a way that was not intended. But luckily, public gardens are perfectly suited to be sentinels for when this happens. You all have these beautifully curated collections, you have incredible expertise, and you have a database of information on when these plants were introduced and when they were deaccessioned, how they're being managed. You may have natural areas, which can be really helpful because a lot of times that's where we see escapees pop up. And when you consider the number of gardens and arboretum across, again, North America, this has the potential and is proving to be a really important information network that benefits public gardens and also has the ability to benefit other stakeholder groups as well. And credit where credit is due. Most gardens are already on top of this. This was a survey done, I think, in 2019. But at that time, like over 90% of gardens said, yeah, we're seeing plants escape cultivation. But almost the same number were actively addressing that at their garden and also thought it would be really helpful because even though they were addressing it, gardens really weren't talking to each other and certainly really weren't talking to anyone outside of their garden community. So that's where PGSIP kind of comes in. There was a recognition, again, gardens are doing this work, but they're all kind of doing it in their own silos. So how can we create a network where gardens are collecting information on escaped plants in a way that's systematic and comparable? We need a shared database where that information can be stored. And then as gardens accumulate, share this data with us, our working group has been able to assess that data and start to share information, not about specific gardens. We never connect specific garden records with specific garden entities. We maintain, gardens are able to maintain their privacy about how and if they're participating in PGSIP, but we are able to share really important trends about plants that are being commonly reported, regional trends and regarding specific plants, and share that to outside stakeholders. So the standardization obviously is really important, right? In order to be able to say anything meaningful, we need to make sure gardens are sharing information in the same way. So we do have a guideline document that was developed back in 2020. And there are 4 different ways that a plant that a garden is concerned about can be ranked according to our guidelines. I'm going to start from the bottom here. So watch list is obviously the least level of concern. These are plants where, gardens, you've seen some spread, but this isn't a plant that's like naturalized and around in the landscape around your garden. It may just be something that's happening at the garden. You've seen a little bit of spread. There's some concern, but we're definitely not saying this is invasive. We're not really making broad statements about it. Potentially invasive would be a ranking you might give a plant that maybe it does exist outside the garden to some extent, or you're just seeing an increased amount of spread or increased distance of spread. And then invasive, usually, I'm skipping one here, I'm going up to the top. Invasive is a situation where usually something is commonly found outside the garden, known to be invasive. It's also something that maybe historically has been at the garden. These are things, at least in the Midwest, we think like calorie pear, or we think honeysuckle, or something that commonly occurred in gardens and now we know to be invasive. And then we do have one other category that I'll just lightly touch on is assessed as invasive. Some gardens do really intensive literature reviews or risk assessments about plants, either when they're considering adding them to collection or just kind of as a review exercise to should we keep things in the collection. If your garden does that, that's also information you can share with us. And that really helps out other gardens that maybe don't have the capacity to do that. And then, as I said, well, PGSIP provides this great network for gardens. Once you're registered, you can see what other gardens have shared, you can connect with them. But we also want to make sure that this information helps other stakeholder groups make decisions about, what plants do we want to continue propagating? Do we need to think about low fecundity cultivars for certain plants that are exhibiting the tendency to spread? Invasive plant councils can benefit from this, landscape architects. And this, getting them this information as early as possible helps them to pivot in their business plans if necessary. So just kind of to recap here, the whole idea for PGSIP really originated in 2016. The Morton Arboretum brought together a couple dozen gardens to talk about this issue of collection plant escape, and the consensus was everyone was experiencing this. People weren't really talking about it with each other, and that would be really beneficial to create this network, again, to have that standardized way of collecting and sharing information, a database to hold that information. And that is, in fact, what has happened. And since 2020, we've been working really hard to get gardens enrolled in the program. A couple of papers have been written. One is published, one's under review. And we've created some resources that I'm going to show you in just a minute. And this is one of them. So when we've been talking to stakeholder groups, they obviously are really curious about the data that gardens are sharing. But as I said earlier, the database is controlled access. It's only for gardens who are participating in the program. And so we can't do that, but we did develop this dashboard. So this just gives an overview for anyone in the public or anyone outside the garden community can at least see which states or provinces have gardens that are participating. Those are the ones that are highlighted in this map. It shows you how many gardens. We are currently at 66, and we're actively growing. We have almost 1,100 records. And then what I think is probably really interesting is what are the most commonly recorded taxa. So we have this table at the bottom, and you can see we've got things like Amur cork tree and Japanese tree lilac kind of leading the pack here as being the most commonly recorded. But this is interactive, so you can go in here and click on a specific state or even a group of states, and then that commonly recorded taxa graph will change. So if you just wanted to say, what are gardens in Illinois reporting? You could click on Illinois and that chart will change. And we have had some growers use this. They've gone in, they've looked at it to see if anything that they are selling is on this list of concern, and they can adjust accordingly. And then another resource that we've developed are called these plant alerts. We've issued 2 so far, and we've got a third one in the queue. And these do happen to be the 2 that have been most commonly reported to us so far, Amur cork tree and Japanese tree lilac. That is not necessarily the only criteria for developing a plant alert, but it has worked out that way so far. And these are just a nice way for us to showcase the information that gardens have shared with us. So you see in the case of Amur cork tree, we've had 13 of our 66 gardens have recorded an incidence of Amur cork tree escaping cultivation. It tells you where that's been, which states have reported that. And then it just has some recommendations, and with Amur cork tree, because it's a fruit-producing tree, things that address that, like removing fruit-bearing trees or not selling them, or maybe developing cultivars that reduce the seed fertility, are all kind of recommendations for that plant. For Japanese tree lilac, that's less understood to be an invasive plant. So our focus here is more, let's get more gardens to report on this plant. Let's, maybe if you've got escaped populations, control those. But we're not necessarily saying it's invasive, but we're saying we're concerned about this. Gardens have told us they're concerned about this, and we'd like to learn more. And these are double-sided. There's some information about the plant on the back, about its reproductive strategies, hardiness zones, things of that nature. And then if you know anyone who's interested in this program, if you have other people at your garden or other partners, this is we have a 6-minute video on this program that is professionally done. It's a really great introduction to why PGSIP exists, what purpose it serves, and the benefits that it has, both for gardens and other groups. So I highly recommend this. And if you would like to know more, we have a few recommendations. Signing up for our newsletter is great. We just do 2 a year, so you will not get overwhelmed with information, but it's a great way to know when we have you. That way you'll get plant alerts when they come out. You will have information on when we're holding our introductory webinars, which we do quarterly, and also information on our upcoming workshops. So these are opportunities for gardens who are already familiar with the program, but in most cases haven't entered any data yet. So they're just wonderful events where we usually gather at a public garden. So you're in this beautiful setting. You get to talk to your colleagues there. And then we carve out time to actually sit down and help you get your data entered. And we can answer questions in real time. And I think we've done 8 of these now, and we've just found them to be a really enjoyable and productive way to get involved. And then if none of those work for you for some reason, you can always just contact me and we will have a one-on-one meeting and we'll get your questions answered and help you get started. And what's even better is that if you're an Iris user, Iris has now made it easier for you to participate. We kind of recognize that every garden kind of has their own system for organizing information, and we wanted to try and make it easier for you to gather the data you need for PGSIP as part of your everyday operations. And so we're hoping that the add-on that PGSIP has developed will help do that. So you can more easily, kind of organize and query and export your data. The information you need has been uploaded to our project website. You do have to be registered to access this. So once you're a registered user, you would go to our About menu and you would find this instruction page. And there's a link here that has the guidance that you need to install the new add-on. When I'm done here, I'm going to pass this back over and you're going to get more information about that. But just a quick sneak peek is there are basically 4 new custom attributes. These are all required information if you're going to submit data to PGSIP. We do need to know things like the distance of spread from your collection plant to where the escaped population is, the size of that escaped population. We want to know how common or uncommon is the plant in the region. Is it already abundant in the regional flora or not? And then you have to assign the plant a ranking in accordance with our guidelines. So I went through that pretty quickly, but I'm always happy to answer questions. I love working on this project, and I'm always happy to meet with gardens one-on-one. You can email me at either of these addresses and you will find me. And I'm also happy to answer any questions when we're ready to do that.
Thank you, Michelle. I really love seeing the data dashboard. That's amazing. I'm going to get started with showing the instructions. In January of 2024, actually, IrisBG released an update, and it included the add-on PGSIP package that supports our collaboration with public gardens as Sentinels against invasive plants. And with this install package, you can, like Michelle was saying, easily export the invasive plant data that you recorded IrisBG to the PGSIP portal. So in the next slides, I'll cover the steps for installing this add-on. I'm actually going to paste this link to our Knowledge Library article in the chat really quickly so that you have it on hand. So what the slides I go over today, all this information is included in this article. And so before installing, you will need to make sure that you're using IrisBG version 4.5.3.2 for 1012 or later. So just make sure that you're using that version or more recent version, ideally. Next, you will download the add-on file from the link provided in the Knowledge Library article. And then once downloaded, you can open the file and run it in your IrisBG database. And then this will automatically add the reports and those 4 attributes that Michelle covered that are needed for the PGSIP data. And then after running the file, just restart IrisBG. And then when you open it up, when you open up the reports, you'll see this new report under the miscellaneous dropdown. And you'll also see those 4 new custom attributes that are PGSIP specific. And then finally, you'll go to the website, and here you'll be able to enter the data. I don't think it's an upload. I think it's entering the data that you've exported manually at this point. And that is all I have for the instructions on that.
Thank you, Shanna. Thank you, Michelle. What a great program for collaborating amongst all the gardens. It's really, really important.